I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Skoda Superb Scout. A really interesting choice if what you want is a large family car, but you don't want to jump into the same sort of SUVs as everybody on your street. Instead, this is more of a traditional station wagon, but with a little bit of a lift and some of that kind of rugged-esque black cladding to give it that kind of crossover-y edge without having to sit really high above the rest of the traffic. And of course, the fact that the Scout is based on the normal Superb wagon means that this drives like a car and not like an SUV. And we'll get into all those benefits when we take the Superb Scout 200 TSI, that's right, a big 200 kilowatt 2-litre turbo petrol underneath the bonnet, out for a drive on some great roads in a bit. But first, in this review, we'll do our usual thing. We'll take a look inside the cabin of this refreshed Skoda Superb, check out the back seat and the practicality in the boot, and then hit the road in the Superb Scout for 2020. But before we do that, make sure to hit subscribe down below, help us out on our way to 100K. It really does make a big difference. And if at any time you have any thoughts about the Superb Scout, let me know down below in the comment box. All right, let's get started. Jumping inside the Superb Scout, and I reckon this is a pleasant place to spend time, even if the interior design of the Superb is pretty conservative and not as not even as high design as the Passat, which is this car's cousin within the Volkswagen group. Instead, everything in here is pretty much what you'd expect. There are hard controls for lots of things, and so it's a fairly intuitive cabin to learn. It isn't out there really in any sense of the word. That being said, neither does it feel especially dated, and the technology in here is all up to scratch for 2020. So we're going to run through all of those points in turn. First of all, design. So you sit behind this actually very attractive round steering wheel. The Superb doesn't pretend to be a sports car. It doesn't have a flat bottom, and the rim itself is quite thin. So it's a little old school in that way, but it feels good in the hand. And then you look further beyond that to a now standard digital gauge cluster, which Skoda, like cousin Audi, calls the virtual cockpit. Now, it's not that big, but it is pretty bright. It's customizable. You can get a full map in there and a whole bunch of other data, so it works well. The rest of the tech is down here in the form of a 9.2-inch touchscreen called the Columbus system with Skoda. Snappy enough. It's very crisp and high resolution. There's wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Sadly, no wireless CarPlay yet, but I would expect that to filter through the Skoda range over the next couple of years. But unlike Volkswagens, there's DAB digital radio in the Skoda, which is nice. The rest of the dash kind of has this lateral design to it. Vents are really easy to access. This is all soft touch up here and down here where your leg rests. So cabin quality and material quality feels pretty good here in the Skoda. Climate controls all have physical buttons, so no need to have to go through the screen like you do in some cars. You also sit in comfortable and large seats, so I don't think many people's frames will have issues finding comfort in these particular pews. There's an attractive combination of leather and Alcantara for the most part. 3-stage heating, which also combines with a heated steering wheel. So if you live in a cooler climb, the Superb Scout is going to be really nice, though the seats themselves are not ventilated like in some rivals. However, the cabin is very, very practical. We have large flockline door bins, so keys and the like won't scratch around. Big cup holders, wireless charging ahead of the shifter, large bin between the seats, which is partially cooled, an adjustable armrest here. And while the driving position isn't sort of low and sunk into the car, you do have a good view out. There's fairly decently sized door mirrors, and visibility on the whole is good for such a large vehicle. So on the whole, while the design isn't adventurous, I do give the Superb high marks up here in the front seat. Let's check out what the accommodation is like in the back. In the back of the Superb, it's positively palatial because this is a big car with big room in the second row. So for myself at 6 foot tall, headroom's no trouble. I've got heaps. This car doesn't have the optional sunroof, but I think even with it, you'd be fine, even with tall teenagers or a need to carry adults in the back. In terms of legroom, lots of that behind my own driving position, and tow room is good as well. Plus, even though this is the all-wheel drive version, there's a decently low tunnel here in the center, so if you needed to carry 3 across, that would be really no trouble. That nice Alcantara carries through to the back here, and it's heated on the outboard seats, plus those sitting in the second row have a temperature control of their own with independent fans, which is nice. And the amenities certainly don't stop there. We have a flip down armrest with cup holders. That's at a good height, so it would be a comfy car to do a road trip in, I reckon. We have inbuilt sunshades here, so if you're going to put a baby seat or two in the back, you won't have to fit aftermarket ones, and those soft touch materials are also present here on the back doors. And last but certainly not least, Skoda has a modular headrest accessory system, and on this car what we have mounted is the phone or tablet holder. So if you've got a couple of iPads on a long trip, you can just clip those in really nicely and neatly. No need to install some kind of DVD system in the back of the car. You've got the basics all ready to go. Here around the back of the Superb Scout, and I think it's actually quite a nice resolved looking vehicle, quite pragmatically styled, but it has had a recent facelift that's integrated this chrome bar that connects the two tail lights, and Skoda are chopping across the board their visual logo back here in favor of this spaced out badge. And I think that's a matter of preference, but I actually think it looks quite nice on the Superb Scout. We've also got more of that cladding continuing around here at the rear. And if you're wondering what the heck is going on with those fake tailpipes, it's because the Superb Scout is one of the first Volkswagen Group cars here in Australia to adopt a petrol particulate filter. And the gases coming out of the exhaust on particulate filter vehicles is just too hot. It actually melts the plastic rear diffuser sort of structure. And I think manufacturers, including Skoda, are still working out how to make that look right, but you can tell me your opinion down below in the comments. However, what we do have here is an electric tailgate. There's only one spec of Superb wagon at the moment, and it's this high spec Scout, so it pretty much has all the toys, opening up to reveal a truly massive boot. And that's because the Superb is very large. It's so long it won't fit in everybody's garages, but it doesn't feel gargantuan when you drive it, as we'll find out in just a sec. What is gargantuan is the boot, 660 litres and truly practical. Skoda are very pragmatic, so there's not just one net, there's three, so that your stuff isn't rolling around and causing a din. We've got all the stuff you'd expect back here from a European car, pull tabs to drop those rear seats flat from right here, plenty of hooks so that you can hang up your shopping and it's not just going to fall about the place. And as well, underneath this boot floor, a space saver spare. So that gives you a little bit of peace of mind, although I reckon they probably could have crammed in a full-size spare if they really tried, given the size of this vehicle. And we have this large cargo cover that glides back at just a push, making everything quite easy to use. And there's also a ski port. I won't leave that one out because this is an all-wheel drive vehicle and will be quite nice to take to the snow. So what is the Skoda Superb Scout like to drive, and where does it kind of fit in with the continuum of family cars available on the Australian market? Well, that's what we're going to discuss now, because I reckon this is a really good vehicle to consider if you only need 5 seats. Of course, the kind of trump card of something like a Skoda Kodiaq SUV or a Tiguan Allspace, or a larger 3-row vehicle, is that you have that 7-seat flexibility. But if you have no interest in using 3 rows of seating, then a wagon-based vehicle like this has a number of inherent advantages, and we'll get through those. But first, let's chat about what's under the bonnet, because I would say this vehicle has been generously engined for 2020. The Superb Scout has only been around in Australia in quite a limited capacity, but previously the Superb wagon was available in 3 different engines, sort of low spec 2-litre petrol, a high spec 2-litre petrol, and a 2-litre diesel. Now it's just this, a 200 kilowatt 2-litre turbo petrol, the Volkswagen Group EA888 engine with 350 Newton meters of torque. So if you were going to compare it to anything, you'd compare it to the Golf R wagon, which has 213 kilowatts of power. But basically the Superb Scout has a petrol particulate filter, as I was mentioning before, and that sees power come down a little bit, but it still feels very much like the Golf R station wagon in that it's powerful, it's boosty, and it's all-wheel drive. And while the Superb Scout is a large vehicle, it has a surprising turn of speed, and you certainly get where you want to go pretty quickly. If you put the boot into this thing, the whole car kind of leans back a little bit on its relatively soft suspension and just shoots for the horizon. So coming out of this corner, plant the boot, as you probably can't hear, the engine is fairly subdued. There's no sports exhaust or anything like that, but you just make easy, smooth, fairly linear progress. And your progress is just that bit more smooth because we have the 7-speed wet clutch, dual clutch transmission in this car. Now, the wet clutch DSGs are much better than the dry clutch ones in feeling really smooth and imperceptible when they're left to their own devices, and that's exactly how it is in the Superb Scout. And you can drive it through the pedals behind the wheel here, and they're really responsive. So the gearbox I'm really pleased with, and you can see how much effort and how much money Volkswagen have put into tuning these things through the years, and Skoda gets the benefit of that too. So engine and gearbox get a big tick. Efficiency, yeah, you know, we're dealing with a turbo petrol, but we were able to get 9 litres per 100 without trying, and we tend to drive a little bit more quickly when testing cars. Now, a diesel option would be good, but this is a low volume car, so Skoda kind of has to guess what the majority of people will want, and at the moment they think that is a 2-litre turbo petrol. What I think everyone would be able to agree on though is the practicality of having the Haldex all-wheel drive system, so it can divert torque to the rear end almost instantaneously if it detects slip at the front end. And the Scout also has a dedicated off-road mode which shuffles torque around much quicker and sort of more proactively if you're driving on dirt or snow, and we found that that actually worked really well. And you can really balance the Scout when you're cornering because this isn't a particularly heavy car, only about 1.6 tons despite its size, and so you can drive it conservatively and you won't really notice how good the dynamics can be. But when you start to push on in this vehicle, you can feel that right there under the skin, under the layers, there is the heart of, you know, a performance Golf in this car, which is really nice, or an Octavia RS wagon, or whatever you want to compare it to. It's not as out and out sporty, and the suspension is softer, but it turns in crisply, more crisply than you'd expect. There's decent front end grip despite only having relatively modest Pirelli Cinturato P7 rubber on this car. And while there's some float and a little bit of roll in the corners, you can just sort of lift the throttle on your way out, and you do feel a little bit of rear end float, a touch of lift off oversteer, which sets you up really nicely to sort of jet off hard on the throttle. But you can also dig into that throttle really hard on corner exit, and you just feel a nice, secure, all-wheel kind of pull out of the corner. So it can kind of do a few different personalities, if you like, when you're driving it harder, which is nice. Speaking of that ride quality, in comfort and normal, it's pretty sorted. Only sort of the biggest mid-corner bumps really make their way into the cabin. But if you put it into sport, it's great. This is one of the only VW Group cars, I reckon, that has a usable sport mode that isn't too stiff, and that really cinches in the body control and lets you push on as hard as this car can go. So that's cool. Plus, the sport steering is not too heavy, but I think I still prefer it in the normal weight, which is just light and direct and makes this car feel really maneuverable. On the safety front, it's good. We've got the full suite here. We've got adaptive cruise, we've got blind spot, lane keep assist, rear cross traffic alert. Sadly, no 360-degree camera, which would have been really helpful on a yacht like the Superb, so that's a bit of a shame. And also a note on refinement, there is more road noise in here than in a Passat wagon. I reckon I could live with it. You can turn up the Canton premium stereo, but it's probably a touch noisier than I would have liked. So those are our detailed opinions on the 2020 Skoda Superb Scout. We really love this wagon-based family car. It's got a nice strong turbo petrol engine under the bonnet that actually gives it a remarkable turn of speed, while still having those kinds of dynamics that you associate more with a passenger car than with an SUV. So for me, it really is the best of both worlds. But I want to know what you think of Skoda's traditional wagon, just raised a little bit. So let me know down in the comments whether you'd consider a Superb Scout, whether you're more of a Kodiaq person or something else entirely. While you're down there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. As always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.